Good afternoon, and welcome to our continuing series on the ideal of human unity with our beloved Kittu Reddy. Namaste, Kittu.
Thank you.
We're in chapter 18, are we?
I don't remember the name of the number, but the ideal solution, a free grouping of mankind. I'll tell you the number. 18.
You wanted to read a paragraph or two.
Yeah, now I'll just give you certain ideas. When this book was written in 1915 to 1918, and the First World War was going on, at that time there were empires. The British Empire, the French Empire, the Dutch, and the Spanish and the Portuguese.
Mm-hmm.
And except Europe, almost all the other continents were colonies. India was a colony, Philippines was a colony, whole of South America was a colony, Canada was a colony, Australia was a colony. Only China was not a colony, as Aurobindo writes, because it was too big a morsel to bite. So, to have such a huge country under your, right, too big a morsel to bite. So anyway, so in this chapter he is discussing at the beginning the possibility of converting these empires into psychological units. Because an empire is always done by force. First military force, then colonization, then cultural colonization, then if possible religious colonization, etc. etc. These are the ways of dominating. So he was just throwing a possibility that if these empires have to last, evidently they have to become psychological units. Because wherever there is moral injustice, you can write it down that it is a question of time, today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow, when the conditions are ready and the people below are reasonably strong, there will be a revolt. That is inevitable. So moral principles have to prevail in the long run. So now all that is over.
No more empires.
No more empires. Today there are over 200 nations in the United Nations. But then the next question is, and in the human cycle in detail he has dealt with it, but in this book he says, the question that I'm asking is that all these so-called nations, are they really nations? In other words, do they have a psychological something within which binds them?
Could we call it a soul?
Without using that word, in this chapter he has not used the word soul. He has used the word that subtle something. Right? So I'll read out that first paragraph. The first principle of human unity, groupings being necessary, should be a system of free and natural groupings, which would leave no room for internal discords, mutual incompatibilities, and repression and revolt as between race and race or people and people. So you see, there are some people, because he has used the word, groupings being necessary. There are a very small number, idealists, or ideologically they believe, that this concept of nation must go. No nation, only humanity, one grouping. Now, Aurobindo says that is impossible.
Yeah.
Because the nation is a living entity with a soul, so essentially it is a spiritual entity. And that is why when Nirodha asked Aurobindo that why did you take all this trouble for freeing India and all that, he says, my dear sir, do you think that for me India was merely a piece of land and a few million people? Right?
Yes, yes.
It was
yes,
a living soul,
yes.
and that is why I use the word Bande Mataram. Bande Mataram means I salute to the mother. So groupings are indispensable. So what is necessary is a system of free and natural groupings. For otherwise, the world state would be founded in part at least upon a system of legalized injustice and repression, or at the best upon a principle of force and compulsion, however mitigated. See, now there are two forms of injustice. In the empire, it was force. Today, very often, or sometimes at least, there is something called legalized injustice. If the United Nations, a body that is respected by everybody, passes a certain law or makes a certain statement which is unjust, you can't do anything about it. Legalized injustice. You see, that is why it is Narendra Modi's action in Kashmir. If it had been gone to the United Nations, if the Security Council had accepted it as part of their duty to intervene, he would have been in very serious trouble. So, luckily, France, he was in France a few days back, and then Russia outright, America after a little cajoling, and you saw that he hit him hard and he winked a little bit. So, all of them have come to our side, you see. Now, this is very important. And if they had intervened, they would have created, according to us, legalized injustice. So, justice must be, even legally, it must be just, right? And in India, there is quite a problem. This lady, Mamata Banerjee, I saw her before coming, shouting away at the top of her voice that Kashmir, she should not have done that. Then they asked her point blank, is Kashmir an integral part of India? And he said, no, it is not. It is under dispute. So, according to us, it is, if they had intervened, it would have been legalized injustice. And that is much more dangerous than using brute force to suppress people. Agreed? So, such a system would contain dissatisfied elements eager to seize upon any hope of change and throw their moral force and whatever material power they might still keep on the side of any velleities that might appear in the race towards disorder, secession, dissolution of the system, and perhaps a return to the older order of things. Moral centers of revolt would thus be preserved, which, given the restlessness of the human mind, could not fail to have, in periods favorable to them, a great power of contagion and self-diffusion. So moral centers of power, of injustice, right, of revolt would be preserved if there is injustice. Now this is a very big gamble that Narendra Modi has taken. If the people of India on the whole felt that it was a wrong act, they would have been in very serious trouble. But on the whole, over 90 to 95% believe that he has done the right thing. Right?
There is recently an article by a lawyer who has said that things were better before this change of 370.
See, now that is a matter of very serious discussion. The BBC and the CNN are absolutely against what Narendra Modi has done, right? Although the Trump and Boris Johnson has more or less agreed, right? But the media is very much against, right? And that, if they had support in India, it would have been a kind of civil war. But fortunately, the majority of Indians, I will say the majority, not the whole of India, a very big majority, are happy with this. So if there is a moral centers of revolt, they can. If Mamata has any power and any influence, she will soon spread all over India this desire to revolt against the present government. But I don't think it will happen. But in politics one can never say, one has to wait and see. What do you think will happen? Do you think there will be...
Nothing will happen.
Nothing will happen. Because I think on the whole the Indians are happy.
Yeah.
So in fact any system which would appear to stereotype anomalies, eternize injustice and inequality, or rest permanently on a principle of compulsion and forced subjection could have no security and would be condemned by its very nature to transience. Now this again, there is no need to get into the argument. If you see Doordarshan and Republic Channel and all the TV, you will see that life in Kashmir is very smooth. Children are playing cricket, shopping is going on, Garba is going on, etc., etc. If you see BBC, you will find that there is someone has been killed, etc., etc. Now the proportion, I do not know. It is not for me to judge or to pass a comment.
What about the freedom of women?
Freedom of?
Women in Kashmir.
No, you see, when Article 370 was there, a woman in Kashmir, if she married an Indian, she would lose her citizenship. Today all that is gone. You can marry anybody. You can go and buy property in Kashmir. So it has become an integral part of India. That means the laws that apply in Pondicherry, in Tamil Nadu, in Bengal, apply also in Kashmir. Because otherwise Kashmir had its own constitution, its own flag, and these two things make it almost out of India. When you have your own constitution and your own flag, so as in French it is said, l'État dans un État, that means a state within a state. Right? And that is certainly not healthy for the unity of the country. So now, this natural unit, I'll read this one paragraph, it is very important. The natural unit in such a grouping is the nation, because that is the basis natural evolution has firmly created, and seems indeed to have provided with a view to the greater unity. Unless, therefore, unification is put off to a much later date of our history, and in the meanwhile, the national principle of aggregation loses its force and vitality and is dissolved in some other, the free and natural nation unit and perhaps the nation group would be the just and living support of a sound and harmonious world system. Clear? So the natural grouping seems to be the nation. And you ask yourself individually. You are part of many groups. You are part of your family. The next group might be your institution. The next group might be your province, Bengali or Gujarati or Californian or whatever it is. The next group is the nation. Is there any group bigger than that? To which the normal average man is identified? Answer. You are identified with the nation?
Yes.
Are you identified with Asia?
Yes.
No,
You feel deeply with Asia, for Asia?
I do.
not really.
Interesting.
Nation, yes.
No,
You?
I don't feel.
Nation, yes.
Nation, yes, very strongly.
Yeah, nation, yes.
That might be because of the education from the childhood.
I mean,
I can't really say.
like you feel identified with India, it is very powerful, very strong. You might even feel emotionally. Do you feel the same way for Asia?
No. It's like an extension, but it's not the same intense feeling.
Yes, so that is what I mean.
Yes, sir.
And for humanity? Hardly. See, that is why Aurobindo says this word that is there in French, sans patrie. I am sans patrie. That means I don't belong to any nation. I belong to humanity at large. That only Mother and Aurobindo can say. Most of us are identified with either a nation or sometimes a grouping of nations. And we are moving in that direction. SARC is one step in that direction. The European Union is one step in that direction. But it is going through, what shall I call it, more than birth pangs. See, Brexit. It is certain that by October, Britain will be out of the European Union. There are advantages and disadvantages. But basically, Boris Johnson has taken the decision that I am moving out. So you see, that is why these larger units have their place for one reason, one very fundamental reason. As Aurobindo says, it gets you habituated to think in much larger terms. And always when you are part of a larger group, you have to sacrifice something. And you have to benefit also something. But this is only a halfway house. The ultimate step must be world unity. Otherwise, European Union versus American Union versus Asian Union, and if there is a war, it will be terrible. So it has to be a halfway house where you don't stop, you move further up. Right? Okay.
But in that union,
What?
in that union, the nations retain,
Retain their individuality.
yes,
And it is because Britain feels, you see, Britain has been one of the most powerful nations in the last century with the whole world under its feet, right? Today it has become, from that point of view, a second-rate nation. So it is finding it difficult. And another problem about the European Union is that almost all the major decisions are taken by 5 persons who are sitting in Brussels, Belgium. And they do consult, but ultimately they have the authority. And Britain is not very happy about it. So you see, every time you join a bigger group, you have to lose some freedom and you will get some benefits. So you have to weigh. If the benefits are more, you say, okay, I'll sacrifice. If the benefits are less, I will rather quit.
but in the United Nations, you also have a smaller group.
United Nations is not a living body. It has absolutely hardly any authority. Very often it wants something, it doesn't happen. For example, Indonesia, I think it became a dictatorship and there was a big movement in the United Nations. Indonesia walked out of the United Nations. You can go to hell. Right? Then they also softened and he also softened. Sukarno, right? So this is very important that when you become part of a big body, there is a loss of freedom and there is a gain of something else. If the gain is greater, then you will stay on. And you see, that is exactly why Modi did not want the United Nations to get involved in Kashmir.
I'd like to ask a little bit about Brazil.
Brazil is having a lot of problems because of the fires, tremendous fires. And they are asking help from the neighboring countries, from the United Nations. And I think this is a very human problem. I mean, so many fires, so many lives being
And the
destroyed.
dictator?
Huh?
And the fellow is a dictator.
He's a dictator. But I think now we should forget that he's a dictator, we should save Brazil. Then next step should be to handle the dictator. Because if you say he's a dictator, let it burn,
No.
you are destroying the whole,
Exactly.
right? So your priority must be to save the forests, Amazon forests, and so many animals dying. It's pathetic. I've seen pictures of citizens carrying animals on their back and running and going out of danger. So it is a very sad story. And so first save that, and there the United Nations can play a very big role. And of course America, because it is rich and it is a neighbor.
Okay.
So now the important sentence. Race still counts and would enter in as an element, but only as a subordinate element. So when you say the Indian race, it's rubbish. When you say the Aryan race, again it is rubbish. In the secret of the Vedas, Sri Aurobindo has explained in great detail that there is something called an Aryan culture and a Dravidian culture, but not something called the Aryan race and the Dravidian race. And he said that I have been fed with these ideas when he came to Pondicherry in 1911, and when he saw all the Tamil friends who were coming around him, he said they were exactly like the Bengalis. So where is the Aryan race and where is the Dravidian race? So then he went into a detailed study in the secret of the Veda, and he says there is a cultural difference. North Indian music is quite different from the South Indian music. But all top class North Indian musicians get their basic training in South India. And once the grounding is solid, then they go and add ghazal and this and tumri. There is no tumri in South India, right? But now South India is slowly also absorbing some of the music from the north, and that is the work of Ravi Shankar. I mean, there is a rag which is my favorite. It's called Hansa Dhwani. It's a South Indian rag. It's a very beautiful rag, afternoon rag. And he with Bal Murali Krishna, who is a typical South Indian, they have sung a duet. I mean, not sung a duet, he has sung and he has played this. It's beautiful. So there is a kind of movement to integrate, right? But even then, Aryan culture and Dravidian culture are definitely there. And the southern temperament is quite different from the northern temperament. And the southerns, especially Tamilians, are very resistant to learning Hindi. You should not pressurize them. Through commentary and through other things, you expose them. Then they will pick up Hindi. But the moment you say Hindi should be the second language there is resistance like anything. So race still counts but would enter in as a subordinate element. In certain groupings it will be predominate and be decisive. In others it will be set at naught, partly by historic and national sentiment, overriding differences of language and race. That means even language and race can be overridden to create that unity. Partly by economic and other relations created by local contact or geographical oneness. Cultural unity would count, but need not in all cases prevail. Even the united force of race and culture might not be sufficiently strong to be decisive. He is giving the example of Alsace. Alsace speaks German. Their habits are German. But they refuse to be German, they want to be French. So neither culture, nor language, nor anything binds them to the mother nation, Germany. They are attached to France. Switzerland is another very interesting example because there are Italians, there are Germans, and there is a third race.
French.
French. See, today Geneva has become the center of world peace. Why? Because if the Swiss get into a war, there will be a civil war. Because the Italians have sympathy that side, the Germans have this side, so they have always remained neutral. It is for survival that they have remained neutral. But that has become now a part of their culture, and it is called the Helvetian culture. Right? So today the races are many all over the country, right? All over the world. And today, especially with easiness to travel and go and settle down, right? In Pondicherry there are plenty of foreigners all over and here, right? So there is a kind of multiculture that is forming itself. And yet, in spite of all that, race, culture, there is something else which he calls that subtle something, right? So I'll give you that last sentence. Race, language, local relations, and economic convenience are powerful factors. But what decides must be a dominant psychological element that makes for union. Now, what is this psychological element? To that subtler force, all others, however restless they may be, must succumb, however much they may seek for particularist expression and self-possession within a larger unity. They must needs subordinate themselves to the more powerful attraction. What is this powerful attraction? Try to define it. It is neither race, nor language, nor local relations, nor economic convenience only. They play a role. But there is something else. And Aurobindo, in the 4th chapter of the Human Unity, Discovery of the Nation Soul, what we are reading on Monday. That subtle something which is perceptible but not definable. Correct or not?
Correct.
Now, if you try to define it, the moment you define it, it loses its. So it is. These words are Aurobindo's. Perceptible but not definable. Because he answered Nirodha like this. Why did you risk your whole life for this getting freedom for India? He says, because it is Mother India. And I worship her as the mother. But then I cannot define it. But if you are true to yourself, you can perceive it. So perceptive but not definable. Perceivable but not definable. So you see, now the problem is this. When you have defined a nation, and when the United Nations has accepted 200 nations, at least according to Aurobindo, Pakistan is not a nation. Because his very first sentence in 1950 to Munshi, unasked for. Munshi had an interview with Aurobindo. And after talking about spiritual life and all that, suddenly Aurobindo asks, when do you think India and Pakistan will become united? He says, no chance at all. The Congress party we all accepted. Aurobindo nodded his head and said, India will be united. Pakistan has been created by falsehood, fraud and force, and it must be brought under India's military ambit. So naturally this is only for the Aurobindonians. To outsiders I will not tell anything. They have to find out for themselves, right? So this Indian nation is something which is very difficult to define. And Pakistan is certainly part of the Indian nation. And I think out of the 200 odd nations that are there in the United Nations, there are many which do not have that inner something. Especially these artificial nations that have been created in Africa. British Guyana, French Guyana, Why are they called nations? Because at one time the British ruled them, neighbor French ruled them, somewhere else the Dutch ruled them. They've been created as nations. But I have seen very strong tendencies that they all want to come together and feel that cultural something which might lead to a nation. And a big problem is in Spain now. Catalonia
Yes.
is a part of Spain, integral part of Spain. How? By force it was conquered. Now in the modern age, Catalonia is demanding first autonomy. That means within the Spain, but a certain amount of freedom. But then, because the Spanish were not giving it easily, they moved one step further. Catalonia has a soul which is separate from Spain. Very difficult argument, but they are demanding for that. Right? So, this is the problem that the chairman or the president of the United Nations has to discover which of these nations have that inner something. Because those which have that inner something will survive under all conditions. Like India, 5,000 years of invasions. India has survived. And as Aurobindo said, Hinduism is not such a fluffy thing that it will disappear. It has lasted 5,000 years and it will last at least another 5,000 years. And very strong statement. Because there is something fundamentally right. So we have to find out in nations whether there is something fundamentally right or not. If it is there, you do what you like, it will come back. If it is not there, at the first knockout, it will be out. He gives the example of Poland. So many times Poland was the first nation annexed by Germany by Hitler.
Yes.
Poland has become free. Russia annexed Poland. Poland has become free. Because the Polish soul will not accept domination. They are weak. For the time being, they'll sit quietly. But as soon as they become... So in these nations, we have to find out which ones have got souls.
I think this is also true of the Baltics.
What?
It's also true of the Baltic nations.
Yes, many of the Baltic nations.
They were conquered by so many.
This is a very big problem in Aurobindo now, because you want to create pavilions for all nations. So they don't know now. At least one of them came and told me that,
Interesting.
is it really a nation? Serbia, Albania, right? I said I can't answer because for that I must know Serbia very well. I like Serbia very much because a small nation has produced world champions in tennis and football and all that. That's a different thing. But that inner thing, very difficult to say. And especially African nations.
And the breakup of Yugoslavia.
The breakup of Yugoslavia. Somewhere Aurobindo has referred to Yugoslavia as a nation with a soul. But it is also possible that when you break up sometimes, over a period of time, a nation can develop a soul. And there is an article by Nolenida on this, where he says that sometimes, see, that is a big problem today. Does Bangladesh have a soul? I'm not in a position to answer, because many Bangladeshis who are friends, they ask this question. I give them a evasive answer, but I say, I think that you have a soul, but you are a sub-soul of the Indian soul. Like Bhutan is a sub-soul of the Indian soul. Sri Lanka is a sub-soul of the... You take up the map of in the playground.
Yes.
All these are separate countries today. All of them have sub-souls to the main Indian soul. Because each province in India, or almost each province, has a soul of its own. And Aurobindo speaks about the Bengali soul very, very clearly. And I think all the nations have got something very deep to which they are attached. But it is very subtle and very difficult, as I said, to define. You might be able to perceive. Does Delhi, I'm asking you, have a soul of its own? You must be feeling.
Yes.
That is very important. NCR, I mean National Capital Region. Because I was seeing arguments. No, it is just a piece of land. They said, no, it is much more than a piece of land. There is something that has grown within it. These are all the new states, no? Now Telangana, has it got a soul of its own? Andhra Pradesh, has it got a soul of its own? Difficult to say.
You could ask the same question about America. You have the South, which is so different from the North. You have the West, which is totally different from the East.
But somewhere Mother has said that it has a soul.
Yes, no question.
Despite all the differences, and despite the enormous freedom of speech, which I think is the one country where there is total freedom of speech, right? Or almost total, still there is something, and that something came out very strongly before the Second World War. Because America jumped into the war after the Japanese invasion, and both Mother and Aurobindo were delighted that a powerful country has entered into the deeper spirit, and that's why there is a message, I think a message to America by Aurobindo,
Yes.
where he speaks of that, that those inner possibilities. And being a young nation, it is far more open to higher influences. The European nations are already got a long culture and they have every reason to be proud, but a lot of resistance. Not lot, much resistance. So this is the problem. This is very subtle. And I don't think the United Nations President has got that insight to be able to say, but that time alone will show, because a nation that does not have a soul, sooner or later it will die from within. A nation that has, when I say sooner or later, not 2 or 3 years, it can be a century or a little more. And where the inner thing is there, do what you like. You can remove it, wipe it, it will come back. In the 5th chapter of the human cycle, of the ideal of human unity, political unit and real unit. A political unit is held by force, any kind of force, military, financial, this, that. A real unit, remove all the force, still it will remain together. So I believe that India is one of them, France is one of them, even England is one of them, because of Aurobindo has said, America is one of them. Might be a few other countries, not a few others, many others. Spain certainly, Portugal.
What will happen to China in this grouping of nations?
You see, in 1950, after Mao Zedong came in 1949, Aurobindo remarked to Hiroshima that China will break up into 3. This system of taking away your liberty will not last. And today there is a very serious movement in Xinjiang, it's in the northwest of China, where totally Muslim population. They are going to each one, trying to convert them into communism. Many of them agree, those who don't agree, they are shot point blank. And once one man is shot, all the rest, they say, better be alive, communist alive, but at least one day we can come back, hopefully. So I do not believe that with this kind of attitude, there will not be a revolt. There will be a revolt. It's a question of timing. And Narad told me personally, Sri Aurobindo said categorically, China will break up into three: mainland China, somewhere middle China, and Xinjiang. It's a gigantic nation.
Any questions?
Mr. Ramasamy?
Do you envisage a reunion of India and Pakistan soon?
What?
Sorry, again.
Do you envisage a reunion of India and Pakistan soon?
Do I?
Do you envisage a reunion of India and Pakistan
No,
soon?
absolutely. And my support is Sri Aurobindo and Mother. In fact, Mother has written a letter to me. I've got it in French. This disappearance of Pakistan is inevitable. It could have happened earlier, but human ignorance has delayed it. So I think we are losing our ignorance a little bit now. There are very strong movements in India and some movements in Pakistan. And why don't we join together? Trade exchange, this exchange, cultural exchange, and look at the music. The music in Pakistan and the music in India, the classical music, is absolutely the same. Ghazal in Pakistan and Ghazal in India. Who is that? Mehdi Hassan, no? There is someone. He is a Pakistani, superb music. So we have every reason to come together. When that ignorance veil is gradually removed among the top politicians in both countries, but with Imran Khan it will be difficult. Unless there is a radical change somewhere.
This is also because he's a Pathan. He's not from Pakistan mainland.
He's not
Indian.
yes.
He's a Pathan.
And a very large number of Muslims in Pakistan and almost all the Muslims in India are converted Hindus. It is only a small number of Pathans and others who came from Turks and all that. And that number, as Sri Aurobindo says somewhere in the foundation, is a very small percentage. So, in the vein, that culture is there.
How are these nation souls created in the first place? I mean, since the beginning, it's just a very vague question.
No, that Sri Aurobindo said always created or almost always created by a certain amount of force because there was a sense of danger. See, a sense of culture, cultural unity can come about. Linguistic unity can come about. Religious unity can come about. In India, all these three played a big role. But political unity came after the British came. They conquered us. There was a threat. First movement was Sepoy Mutiny, but it was only a short movement. Then they formed the Indian National Congress. However weak it was a very major step because that meant that India is a political united something. Then when Sri Aurobindo came, it got a dynamism, very powerful. Gandhi came and gave it some good points and some not so good points, right?
And what about the spiritual entity of the nation
Yeah, I
soul?
thought that was your
That was my
question,
question,
yeah. His question was more that indefinable, for lack of a better word, soul.
The spirit is unborn and undying, so you cannot really say that the spiritual entity is ever created.
It was always there. And Sri Aurobindo says, in this yuga, it seems that India has been selected
Yeah.
as the land where the spiritual
Yes.
thing. Same thing Mother has said.
Hmm.
And that is why both Mother and Sri Aurobindo are hoping and waiting for India to realize its spiritual unity, and then it can lead the world. It can become the guru of the world. These are her own words. But then she was asked, do you see any movement in that direction? It is not yet. What is the reason? A lot of falsehood covering. So you have to get rid of that falsehood.
But she did say to my friend that India and America would lead us into the new world.
Yes, absolutely. America is young. America has got all the financial power and the dynamism, and India has got the. If the two join, I remember that even the army chief, Bipin Joshi, I was very close to him. He went to America and he had taken a book written by Maggie. I've forgotten the name of the book, where he speaks of somebody who was in a concentration camp and he was suffering so much that he started praying. Somebody came in front of him, tall, not tall, middle, 5'4" or 5'5" with a beard. And he said, I am Aurobindo Gos. Aurobindo Gos, Gos.
This is in the book The Lost Footsteps.
Yes, the lost footsteps. And then immediately all his suffering disappeared. When the war was over,
he showed him how to get out of his body
Yes.
during the torture
Yes.
and then come back into it later.
Exactly. So after that he came to the ashram.
Yes, he came, he met mother.
He met the mother.
Yes,
This is a Romanian person.
Huh?
he was Romanian.
So, what is his name? I have forgotten. But he came to the ashram, he met mother, and mother told him everything about his own inner life.
What were the views of Sri Aurobindo and mother on Jawaharlal Nehru?
Well, 2 points of view. Sri Aurobindo had said, because Sri Aurobindo never met Nehru, Sri Aurobindo had said his psychic is developed. And if he takes up to the spiritual path, it is possible that he might get it in this very life itself. But then being Congress president, peace and spirituality, impossible. So that is what Sri Aurobindo said. In 1955, Nehru came twice, on January 11th and again on September 29th. At that time, Pondicherry was being transferred to India. So he came, he met mother and he really warmed up to her. Somewhere within he felt something. But then again, just before coming here, I read letters where Dilip Kumar Roy and Jawaharlal Nehru, very, very critical of the mother. She is an absolute dictator. She has taken all the money in her hands. She keeps no accounts. She does what she likes. And somebody sent it to me this morning.
This morning?
So it is known as a sad story of the ashram.
It's actually Dilip who complained to Nehru.
What?
Dilip Roy, he kind of sent a complaint to Nehru.
Complaint.
It was not Nehru's own views. He was,
No, but Nehru was touched.
Yeah.
Nehru was very strongly influenced.
Yes, that is.
So in 55 he came twice. Indira came the second time with him. And mother saw something in her, some spark. In 1962, when the Chinese war took place, mother sent some jewelry and money, and Indira was receiving it. So Indira sent a letter to mother. When the letter came, Pranabda gave it to her. Without opening it, mother said, there is something in this person. And then she opened the letter and said, yes. And so then she saw that there is something, a spark, which I can use in Nehru. So, 4 politicians whom she saw. One was Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, who opened the International Center of Education. And mother said that he will be a good man, or not the ideal, but still he will be a good man to lead the country. The other person that she saw was the girl, a spark of something. Third one was Indira Gandhi, a spark of something. And the fourth one was Kennedy. When Kennedy was assassinated, mother was very went into trance. Mother said I could have done a lot of work through him. You must be knowing Kennedy much better than me. There was something?
Absolutely.
Hmm?
Absolutely.
Don't worry about his moral things.
No.
Womanizing, all that doesn't matter. But there was something which was very beautiful and noble. The whole family, John, Robert, the elder brother, Edward Kennedy backed out because he thought, I don't want to be killed. Because these two brothers were killed, John and Robert.
The moment that the moment Robert was killed, I knew this young lady in California. She was very much with him. She was there when he was shot. She called me in tears at 2 a.m. and said, "Please telegram mother," which I did. But it was too late. He was killed on the spot.
So mother had hope in these four persons. I don't know what mother would have said if Modi was here, if she was here when Modi. Many people have told me that he's a divine instrument. Many have said he's the devil's instrument. I said I don't no opinion.
The name of that Romanian is Silviu Cresiunas.
What?
Romanian man
Silviu
Cresiunas.
Crăciuna.
Yeah.
That book,
Yeah.
in the Lost Footsteps.
Lost Footsteps, yes. Thank you.
Your question about Pakistan, I am absolutely sure. Because Aurobindo has said it and mother has written
How many years?
letter
You have
to
any
me.
prediction?
Huh?
How many years?
That very difficult to say. At least I can't say. Those who have that inner vision might be able to be able to say.
Wonderful, Kittu. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Special day. Huh?